On Thanksgiving Day, my son smiled and asked, "Did you like the lake house I gave you, Mom?" I froze. What lake house? I never received anything. I never imagined that one simple question on Thanksgiving would unravel everything I thought I knew about my life. The clinking of silverware stopped mid-air. For a moment, it felt like every eye at the table turned to me. Daniel's smile faltered, just slightly, but I noticed. "Mom?" he prompted again. "The lake house? The one I bought for you last year?" I asked Sophie to handle all the details so you wouldn't have to worry about anything. "And the monthly transfers too. You've been getting them, right? I'm so glad you're here. Stick with me until the end and drop a comment with the city you're watching from. I'd love to see how far my story travels." I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. My chest tightened like a vice. Lake house? Monthly transfers? What are you talking about? My voice cracked louder than I intended. Sophie, his wife, elegant as ever in her silk blouse and pearl earrings, suddenly stood. "Excuse me," she said softly, clutching her phone as she slipped out of the dining room. I watched her go, a cold chill creeping up my spine. Something was wrong. Daniel frowned, reaching for his phone. "I sent the deed over a year ago. I even had my assistant set up monthly payments." "Wait, did the paperwork never go through?" "Paperwork? Payments?" My head spun. Sophie's laughter floated faintly from the hallway, too light, too controlled. "I never received a house, Daniel," I whispered, my words trembling now. "I never saw a penny of what you're talking about." Daniel's brow furrowed deeper. His fingers flew across his phone screen. "That doesn't make sense." "I'll pull up the records right now." A lump formed in my throat. Pride had kept me from telling him how tight things had become. I'd been scrimping on groceries, skipping medications, even debating whether to sell my wedding ring. All because I didn't want my son, the successful entrepreneur, to know his mother couldn't keep afloat. And now he was saying he'd been sending help. But where was it? Sophie stepped back into the room, her face a careful mask. "Sorry," she said lightly, "just a quick call." But I saw it, that flash of something in her eyes. Not guilt, not worry, control. And suddenly my heart sank with a horrible clarity. I whispered to myself, barely audible over the soft murmur of resumed conversation, "Where is my house, Sophie?" Daniel's fingers danced across his phone screen, his jaw tightening with every swipe. "Mom," he said slowly, "I'm looking at the confirmation emails right now. The lake house deed was sent to you 18 months ago, and monthly transfers have been going into your account ever since." My stomach churned. "Daniel, I never saw a house deed." "I never saw any money." Sophie shifted in her seat. I saw it. The faintest flicker. The mask she wore so well faltered for a split second before her lips curled back into a polished smile. "That's strange," she murmured. Maybe there was a mix-up at the bank." Daniel didn't answer. He scrolled faster, then paused. "Here, look." He turned his phone toward me, showing an email chain from his assistant. "Attached is the finalized deed for the lake property, successfully transferred into Evelyn Bennett's name. Monthly disbursements of $5,000 set to auto deposit." My pulse thudded in my ears. "That's not my email?" I whispered. Daniel's eyes narrowed. "Then whose is it?" Sophie's fingers curled around her wine glass so tightly I thought it might shatter. "Darling, it could just be a clerical error. I'll call the bank first thing tomorrow." "No." Daniel's voice cut sharp. "We'll call now." He tapped his assistant's number and hit speakerphone. "Mr. Bennett?" A crisp voice answered almost instantly. "How can I help?" "Jennifer, can you pull up the file on the lake house transfer? And the monthly payments?" "Yes, sir. One moment." A pause thick enough to choke on. Sophie stared at the centerpiece, not moving, not blinking. "All right, I have it here." The property was purchased in cash and transferred into Mrs. Evelyn Bennett's name. Payments have been issued for the last 24 months, as instructed. Daniel's gaze bore into me. "Jennifer, read me the account number the payments went to." She recited the numbers. My breath caught. "That's not my account," I said, my voice trembling. Daniel froze. Then his face hardened, colder than I'd ever seen. Jennifer, who provided that account information? Your wife emailed it to me directly after you requested the setup. The silence that followed seemed to stretch forever. Sophie set down her wine glass, her hands perfectly steady now. Daniel, Why? Daniel said, his voice low, dangerous. Did you give her a different account number? Sophie opened her mouth, but no sound came out. I felt it then. The first crack in her perfect porcelain mask, and I knew this was only the beginning. Sophie's lips parted, but her voice caught in her throat. For the first time all night, her composure cracked, the faint tremor in her hands betraying her calm facade. I can explain, she stammered, eyes darting between Daniel and me. I thought I was helping. Helping? Daniel's words came out like ice shards. By giving my mother an account she doesn't even own. I opened one in her name, Sophie blurted out as if the words could make it better. It was meant to organize her finances. She seemed overwhelmed. I thought it would simplify things for her. My blood ran cold. You did what? Sophie clasped her hands tightly, her knuckles turning white. You're not great with technology, Evelyn. You've said it yourself. I just handled things to make it easier. Daniel shot to his feet, his chair screeching across the hardwood. Handled? You rerouted 2 years of payments. You interfered with a property transfer. Do you have any idea what you've done? Sophie's voice rose in desperation. Daniel, please, let's not do this in front of her. Let's talk in private. No, I said firmly before Daniel could respond. You don't get to sweep this aside. I want answers. Now. Sophie took a step back, her flawless makeup betraying the faintest sheen of sweat. You're making this sound worse than it is. I'll show you. I have everything documented. It's all in our records. Then bring it, Daniel snapped. Prove you weren't siphoning my mother's money. Sophie swallowed hard. It's complicated. It's not. Daniel cut her off, yanking his phone from his pocket. If you won't talk, maybe my lawyer will. He stabbed at the screen, his jaw tight with fury. The ringing tone felt deafening in the tense room. Mr. Bennett? A deep, calm voice answered. Alan, it's urgent. Pull up the Lake House file and every transfer to my mother over the past 2 years. I want details. Now. There was a pause, then a slow intake of breath on the other end. Sir, you should come to my office. There are things you need to see. Immediately. Daniel's face darkened as he stared down at Sophie. What did you do? He whispered. Sophie's eyes glistened with tears, but there was no remorse in them, only fear. And in that moment, I realized she wasn't just a woman caught in a mistake. She was a woman caught in a web she'd spun herself. The ride to Alan's office was silent. Daniel's grip on the steering wheel was iron tight, his jaw set, his eyes hard on the road ahead. Beside me, Sophie sat rigid, her manicured fingers twisting the hem of her sleeve. Not a word passed between us, but I could feel the tension radiating from her like heat. As we stepped into the law firm's glass-walled conference room, Alan Bennett, Daniel's longtime attorney, was already waiting. His expression was grave, and his hands rested on a thick folder brimming with papers. Mr. Bennett, Mrs. Bennett, Alan said carefully, then his eyes shifted to me. Mrs. Evelyn Bennett. I nodded stiffly. My chest tightened. Alan cleared his throat. I've reviewed the transactions and the property file. There's no easy way to say this, so I'll be direct. Sophie's breath hitched audibly. Alan laid a document flat on the polished oak table and pushed it toward Daniel. Your wife rerouted funds intended for your mother into a different account. The account is in Evelyn's name, yes, but it was opened and controlled by Sophie Bennett. My head snapped toward Sophie. You stole from me? No, Sophie blurted out, her voice shrill now. I didn't steal. Alan raised a hand, silencing her. There's more. He pulled out another set of papers. The deed to the lake house. It was intended to be transferred to your mother. Instead, Mrs. Bennett here diverted the deed to her parents. They are currently listed as the legal owners and occupants. Daniel's face drained of color. My wife's parents live in the house meant for my mother? Sophie's voice trembled. Daniel, they were going to lose their home. I thought I could fix it before you found out. You forged a signature." Alan's voice was firm now, echoing off the pristine walls. He tapped the deed with one finger. "This isn't Evelyn's handwriting." I stared at the messy scrawl on the signature line. My name, but not my hand. "That's not mine," I said, my voice breaking as a deep anger swelled in my chest. The room seemed to shrink, the air growing thick. "You let me sit in my cramped apartment, struggling to pay for heat," I hissed, my hands trembling, "while you gave my house to your parents?" Sophie finally crumbled, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I was trying to help my family. You destroyed mine." Daniel's roar shook the room. The silence that followed felt heavy, oppressive. Alan placed his hands flat on the table. "Daniel, this isn't just unethical. It's criminal. Forgery, fraud, identity theft." He trailed off, his eyes meeting mine with quiet gravity. And in that moment, humiliation turned to something sharper, more dangerous. Resolve. Sophie stood alone in the guest room, her back turned to the door. Her shoulders shook faintly as she packed clothes into a leather suitcase, movements sharp and frantic. I stepped inside, closing the door softly behind me. "Why?" She froze. I took a deep breath, forcing my voice to steady, though my heart pounded in my ears. "Why would you take everything meant for me? Why would you betray Daniel like this?" Her head dropped forward. "I didn't mean for it to go this far." I moved closer, my anger boiling just beneath the surface. "Don't lie to me. You knew what you were doing when you forged my name. You knew when you rerouted those payments. You even handed that house to your parents while I sat in the cold, rationing food like some forgotten stranger." Sophie spun around, tears streaming down her face. "You don't understand. They were going to lose everything. Their house was under foreclosure. I thought if I borrowed the money, just temporarily, I could save them and then fix it before anyone noticed." "Borrowed?" My voice cracked, louder than I intended. "Do you even hear yourself? That wasn't yours to take. You stole my son's love and my future in one greedy move." Sophie crumpled onto the bed, clutching her head. "I wasn't trying to hurt you. I was trying to protect them." "Protect them?" I shouted, the sound foreign even to my own ears. "And what about me? I've been your family longer than they ever were. You let me suffer while you played the hero for people who already had their daughter." The door creaked open behind me. "Mom!" Daniel's voice was low, shaking with barely contained rage. I turned, startled. He stood in the doorway, his face ashen, his expression unreadable. "Daniel, please." Sophie scrambled to her feet, rushing toward him. He stepped back, his eyes cold. "Sophie, pack your bags." Her lips trembled. "No, no, please." "Daniel, don't do this. We can fix it. I'll make it right. I swear." He didn't flinch. "You betrayed me. You betrayed my mother. There's nothing left to fix." The air between us thickened like a storm ready to break. Sophie collapsed back onto the bed, sobbing into her hands, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I felt seen. The front door slammed hard enough to rattle the windows. Sophie's sobs echoed faintly from the driveway before fading into silence. Daniel stood motionless in the hallway, staring at the floor. His hands hung limp at his sides, the weight of everything finally breaking through his calm exterior. I hovered near the kitchen counter, gripping the edge so tightly my fingers ached. "She's gone," he said finally, his voice hoarse. "She had to be," I whispered, though the words tasted like ash in my mouth. Daniel's shoulders sagged. "I trusted her with everything, Mom. And she turned it into a weapon against you. Against us both. She didn't just steal money." My voice grew stronger as I spoke, the numbness burning off into sharp determination. "She stole time, security, my dignity, and she made me feel like a burden in my own son's life." Daniel flinched at that, his jaw tightening. "I didn't know. If I had, she made sure you wouldn't." I stepped closer, my voice softening. "But you're here now, and we can still fight back." He nodded slowly, but his eyes were dark, clouded with something heavier than anger. Just then, Daniel's phone buzzed loudly on the countertop. He glanced at the screen and frowned. "Alan," he answered on speaker. "Mr. Bennett?" Alan said briskly, his tone unusually urgent. "I've been digging deeper into Sophie's activities. There's something else, something that affects your mother directly." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" Alan hesitated. "Mrs. Bennett, I don't want to alarm you, but it appears Sophie filed tax returns in your name over the last 2 years to cover the income she rerouted. The IRS is showing unreported funds connected to you." I felt the blood drain from my face. I never saw any of that money. "I know," Alan replied gravely, "but the IRS doesn't. If we don't act quickly, you could face penalties or even accusations of fraud for income you didn't receive." Daniel swore under his breath and slammed his palm against the counter. "She's destroyed everything." "No," I said, my voice steady now, sharper than I expected. "She's tried to destroy everything, but she hasn't succeeded yet." Alan's voice lowered. "We'll need to move fast. I recommend involving a forensic accountant and possibly the authorities. The longer we wait, the more exposed Evelyn becomes." Daniel nodded grimly. "Do it. Pull every record you can find. I want to know the full extent of what she's done." Alan agreed, then hung up. Daniel looked at me, his expression heavy with guilt. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I should have protected you." I straightened my shoulders. "She underestimated me, Daniel. She thought I was weak, that I'd quietly endure while she drained me dry. But I'm done being silent." For the first time in months, I felt something stir in my chest. Not fear, not grief. Fire. Daniel's living room became our war room. Stacks of papers, printouts, and manila folders spread across the coffee table like battle plans. He sat hunched forward, his elbows on his knees, staring at the growing pile of evidence. "She didn't just reroute payments," Daniel muttered, his voice low and strained. "She stole your identity, Mom. She opened accounts, took out credit cards, even claimed government benefits in your name." I pressed a trembling hand to my mouth. "Benefits? Why would she?" Daniel's jaw tightened. "To make you look like you were living off state assistance. To justify why you didn't need my help anymore." A sharp knock on the door snapped us both to attention. Daniel crossed the room and pulled it open. A tall man in a tailored suit and a young woman carrying a leather briefcase stepped inside. "Mrs. Bennett." "Mr. Bennett," the man said with a nod. "I'm Eric Wallace, private investigator. This is my associate, Grace Lee. Daniel hired us to trace Mrs. Sophie Bennett's actions." Grace opened her briefcase and began laying out documents. "We've uncovered multiple layers of fraud," Eric said gravely. "Sophie used your personal details to open at least 3 bank accounts. She also applied for loans and funneled nearly $100,000 through them under your name." My stomach lurched. "100,000? "Yes, ma'am," Grace said softly. "And there's more. She falsified medical bills to apply for relief funds in your name. Those funds went directly into her secret accounts." Daniel let out a sharp breath and slammed his fist on the table. "She was building an empire off my mother's identity while pretending to be her savior." Eric's voice remained calm, but firm. "We recommend notifying law enforcement immediately. The longer this continues, the greater the legal risk for Mrs. Bennett. Sophie's activities are extensive enough to constitute federal crimes." I sat perfectly still, my hands gripping the arms of the chair. "I want her stopped," I said, my voice clear and steady. "Every lie, every account, every stolen dollar, I want it all exposed." Daniel looked at me, his eyes brimming with guilt and something else. "Admiration. We'll bring her down, Mom. I promise." Eric nodded. "We'll prepare a full report for your attorney. Once this goes to the authorities, they'll take it from there." Grace gathered her notes, her expression tight. "Mrs. Bennett, Sophie never expected you to fight back. She thought you wouldn't notice, but you're stronger than she realized." As they left, I stood at the window, staring out at the cold, gray sky. Sophie had tried to erase me from my own life. Now I was going to erase her from mine. The gravel crunched beneath the tires as we pulled into the long, winding driveway. The lake shimmered in the distance, still and cold, reflecting a sky as gray as my mood. I gripped my purse tightly as the house came into view, my house. Except it wasn't mine. Not yet. Through the large bay window, I saw movement. A woman in a cashmere cardigan poured coffee into a delicate porcelain cup. A man reclined in an armchair, flipping through a glossy magazine. Sophie's parents. Living comfortably on stolen ground. Daniel cut the engine, his jaw set like stone. "Ready?" he asked. I nodded, though my hands trembled in my lap. I've been ready since the moment she forged my name. We walked up the stone steps. Daniel rang the bell, his finger pressing hard. Moments later, the door opened. Sophie's mother, Vivian, stood in the doorway, surprise flashing across her perfectly made-up face. "Daniel," she said cautiously. "What a surprise. We need to talk," Daniel said flatly, stepping past her before she could protest. Her husband, Richard, rose from his chair as we entered. "Daniel? Evelyn?" His brow furrowed. "What's going on?" "You're living in a house that doesn't belong to you," Daniel said coldly. Vivian blinked, clutching her cardigan tighter. "What are you talking about? Sophie told us this was a gift from you. She said it was your way of thanking us for supporting her during your marriage." "A gift?" My voice cracked as I stepped forward. "This house was meant for me. Sophie stole it and handed it to you as if she owned it." Vivian's lips parted, but no words came. Richard frowned. "That's impossible. Sophie showed us the deed. She said it was all settled." Daniel pulled a folder from his coat and dropped it onto the coffee table. "Settled with a forged signature. My mother's name, falsified. The property never legally transferred to either of you. You've been living here under false pretenses." Vivian's face drained of color. "We didn't know," she whispered. "We thought. You thought wrong." My voice was firmer now, steadier than I expected. "For 2 years, I've gone without, while you enjoyed the life Sophie stole from me. Whether you knew or not, that ends today." Richard took a step back, his face reddening. "This is some misunderstanding," Sophie said. Daniel's hand shot up, silencing him. "You have 30 days to vacate this house. If you're not gone by then, you'll be forcibly removed." Vivian gasped. "Daniel, please, don't do this. We didn't mean any harm." Daniel's eyes hardened. "You accepted a house you didn't earn and never questioned how it landed in your laps. That's harm enough." I stared at the room, at the elegant curtains, the marble countertops, the scent of expensive candles burning faintly in the air. This was supposed to be my sanctuary, my safe place. Instead, it had been stolen and turned into their retreat. No more. The call came late at night, just as I was about to switch off the lamp. Sophie's name flashed across the screen. My thumb hovered over the button, tempted to ignore her, but something inside me needed to hear the sound of her unraveling. I answered. "Evelyn?" Her voice was hoarse, frayed at the edges. "Please, don't hang up." I said nothing. "I know I hurt you," she continued quickly. "I made terrible choices, but I swear, I never wanted to ruin your life. I was drowning. My parents were drowning. I thought I could fix everything before it spiraled." "You weren't drowning," I said, my tone sharp, unflinching. "You were feeding yourself while letting me starve. You watched me struggle and decided I didn't matter." Her breath hitched. "It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. Please." Her voice cracked. "Don't press charges. I'll return the money. I'll sign over the house. I'll do anything to make it right." I closed my eyes, gripping the phone tightly. For a fleeting second, I remembered how she used to sit across from me at family dinners, smiling sweetly as if she were truly part of us. But that Sophie never existed. "I spent nights hungry because of you," I whispered. "I stopped filling my prescriptions because I couldn't afford them. You left me in the shadows while you built your castle on my name. I didn't mean for it to happen like this." "You meant every step," I said coldly. "You plotted, schemed, and forged. You don't deserve my forgiveness." There was a long silence. Finally, her voice came again, smaller this time. "Evelyn, if you go to the police, I'll lose everything. I'll go to prison. Please, think of Daniel. Think of the shame this will bring on him." My jaw tightened. "The shame isn't mine to carry. You earned every consequence coming your way." She started to sob, and for once, I didn't feel pity. "You'll answer to the law," I said firmly, my voice as cold as steel. "Not to me." Then I hung up. I stared at the phone in my hand, my reflection faint in the dark screen. The old Evelyn, the one who would have bent, forgiven, and been trampled again, was gone. This time, there would be no mercy. The sirens were faint, but unmistakable. From my seat by the window, I watched the patrol car crawl up Daniel's driveway. The officers stepped out purposefully, their polished shoes clicking against the stone path. Sophie stood on the porch, her hair in a messy bun, her designer coat hanging loosely off her shoulders. She didn't run. She didn't scream. She just froze as they approached, her arms stiff at her sides. "Mrs. Sophie Bennett?" the taller officer asked. She nodded faintly. "You're under arrest for fraud, identity theft, and forgery." The words rang through the quiet air like a bell. Daniel appeared in the doorway behind her, his face blank, unreadable. He didn't speak. He didn't move. As the cuffs clicked around Sophie's wrists, her composure cracked. "Please, there's been a mistake. Daniel, say something. Stop them." But Daniel only turned and walked back into the house, letting the door close softly behind him. I remained still as they guided her into the waiting car. She caught sight of me in the window, her eyes widened, pleading, but I didn't flinch. "You did this to yourself." 2 weeks later, I found myself seated in the courthouse, the air thick with the smell of old wood and tension. "Mrs. Evelyn Bennett, please step forward." My knees wobbled slightly as I rose, but the moment I set eyes on Sophie at the defense table, her makeup smudged, her once pristine blouse wrinkled, I straightened my spine. The prosecutor gestured to me. "Mrs. Bennett, can you describe how the defendant's actions impacted your life?" I gripped the railing tightly. "She stole more than money," I said, my voice steady but thick with emotion. "She stole my security. She stole my son's trust. She left me cold, hungry, and humiliated while she lived in comfort funded by my identity." Sophie's head dropped. The prosecutor nodded. "Thank you." I stepped down, my heart pounding, but not from fear, from power. Later, as Daniel took the stand for his own testimony, his voice cracked. "I loved her. I trusted her with everything. And she betrayed not only my mother, but me as well. I want no part of her future." When the judge finally spoke, his words fell like a hammer. If convicted, the defendant faces up to 5 years in prison. Sophie let out a strangled cry as she was led away. I exhaled, the tightness in my chest loosening just slightly. This wasn't over. Not yet. But the tide had turned. The moving truck idled in the driveway, its engine rumbling low like distant thunder. Boxes were stacked haphazardly on the lawn, lamps poking out at odd angles, and Vivian stood among them, clutching a jewelry box to her chest. "Daniel, please," she said softly. "We had no idea. Sophie told us this was your gift." Daniel didn't reply. He kept his arms crossed, his face hard as granite. Richard came down the front steps, his shoulders slumped under the weight of 2 suitcases. "We never wanted trouble," he muttered. "This wasn't our plan." "You had 30 days, Daniel said sharply. "You stayed 31. That's 1 day too many." A sheriff's deputy loomed nearby, arms folded. He didn't have to say a word. His presence alone made it clear this wasn't a negotiation. Vivian's eyes darted to me. "Evelyn, you're a mother. You understand, don't you? We thought we were doing what was best for our family." I met her gaze without blinking. So did I, when I trusted Sophie. And look where that led me. Her lips pressed into a thin line as tears welled in her eyes. Richard muttered something under his breath and motioned for the driver to close the truck. The doors slammed shut with a metallic echo that seemed to ripple through the still lake air. As they drove away, I felt no satisfaction, no triumph, just silence. Daniel exhaled heavily beside me, rubbing the back of his neck. I let this happen, he said quietly. I was so blinded by love, I didn't see the way she was manipulating everyone around her. I laid a hand on his arm. She fooled us both, but the blame is hers to carry, not yours. I should have protected you, he whispered. You're protecting me now, I said simply. The front door creaked as Daniel pushed it open. Go ahead, Mom, he said. It's yours again. I stepped over the threshold, the smell of lavender candles and expensive wood polish wafting around me. The house was beautiful. Vaulted ceilings, polished marble countertops, wide windows framing the still lake outside. And yet, I felt nothing. No warmth, no joy, just an aching hollowness. Each room seemed like a stage set for someone else's life. Sophie's parents had left their mark. Embroidered pillows on the couch, framed photographs on the mantel, a faint trace of perfume lingering in the air. I wandered through the halls slowly, my fingers brushing over surfaces as if trying to connect to something, anything, that felt like it belonged to me. But there was nothing. Daniel's voice called softly from the doorway. Mom, are you okay? I stared out the bay window at the lake, its surface flat and gray under the heavy sky. How can I ever call this place home? I whispered. And for the first time in weeks, I felt my knees weaken. Not from fear, but from a grief I hadn't allowed myself to feel until now. The courtroom was silent except for the rhythmic ticking of the clock on the far wall. Every second felt heavy, dragging us closer to the moment I'd waited for but also dreaded. Sophie sat at the defense table, her hair pulled back, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She looked smaller now, stripped of her designer clothes and the air of control she once wielded so effortlessly. Daniel sat beside me, his jaw tense, his fingers interlaced. The judge adjusted his glasses and began to speak, his voice deep and deliberate. After reviewing all evidence presented, including forged documents, rerouted funds, and unauthorized use of Mrs. Evelyn Bennett's identity, the court finds Sophie Bennett guilty on all counts. Sophie let out a strangled cry. Restitution will be paid to Mrs. Bennett in the amount of $120,000 for financial damages, in addition to the immediate return of the lake house property. The judge's gaze hardened as he continued. As for sentencing, the defendant is remanded to state custody for a term of 2 years. The gavel came down with a sharp crack, and Sophie's head fell into her hands. Daniel released a long breath, his shoulders slumping slightly. It was over. The bailiff moved towards Sophie, guiding her from the room. As she passed, she lifted her eyes to me, glassy with tears. Evelyn, please, I'm sorry. I met her gaze, steady and unflinching. You weren't sorry when you watched me suffer, I said quietly. Don't expect my sympathy now. She turned away as the bailiff let her out. For the first time in months, the weight on my chest seemed to lift, if only slightly. As we stepped into the sunlight outside the courthouse, Daniel turned to me. It's done. You have everything back. Do I? I murmured. He frowned. You have the house, the money. I shook my head gently. I have my house, yes, but my trust? That's gone forever. We drove back to the lake house in silence. Later, as I unlocked the door and stepped inside, the familiar scent of lavender greeted me. But it didn't feel like mine. Not yet. I stood in the center of the living room, staring out at the still waters of the lake. Sophie had taken so much more than money or property. She had stolen my sense of safety, my confidence, my belief that love could shield me from betrayal. But standing there, I realized something important. She hadn't taken everything. She hadn't taken me. And slowly, piece by piece, I would rebuild.